Down in the front here, though, you've got one of these things. This is a rum jar. So very likely the rum ration has just been handed out. Came in the same kind of stone flagon bottle all the time. And it was marked on the front SRD, which there's a little bit of dispute about what it is. It could be supply reserve depot, various other variations along those lines. But inevitably, troops in the front line, SRD, called it seldom reaches destination. A kind of tongue-in-cheek thing about the fact that they didn't get to see their rum very often. Hi guys, I'm Dan Hill, a military historian specialising in the history of the First World War. In this video, we're going to take a dive into the archives to explore raw, unedited battlefield footage from the 1917 Battle of Arras on the Western Front. So let's get straight into it. So this film, at least, something that's held in the US National Archives, is part of a sequence of reels which were created in their raw form and published in early 1917. So they're filmed around the springtime, between about February and May of that year. And they offer a really interesting glimpse into the life as it was seen on the Western Front about that time. Of course, silent films, as all films are at that time, but it doesn't mean that there's not a lot to gain by looking at these kind of things. So we start off with this great shot here. British 18-pounder guns firing very fast. Interesting that the weather looks pretty dry. Men shirtless here. The Battle of Arras actually is known for being particularly cold. In fact, it was launched in a snowstorm. So what exactly time period we're looking at here is a bit tricky to tell. The Devil's Own. So we've got the tank corps coming up here. These are, of course, very new weapons of war at that time. Male and female variants. Let's just pause here for a second because there's a lot of interesting bits to pull out. This is one of the early variants of tank. You can tell because first of all, it's a male tank because they have these large 6-pounder naval guns on these projections on the side known as sponsons. But the long-barreled versions are fairly early. They actually get short and cut down later on because they become something of an obstacle. We can see the driver and the commander's positions with their little hatches half open here. And this is probably doing top speed, 3 miles an hour, 4 miles an hour, something along those lines. And these things certainly aren't artillery proof. They might be bulletproof to a certain extent, but they are not artillery proof and were quite heavily targeted whenever they went into action. But as you can tell, they caused something of a stir as well. We can see with troops here being pretty enthusiastic to get a little peek inside. British 18-pounder guns dug into the ground. This is by far the most common artillery piece that the British use on the Western Front. Very quick firing. Much heavier, possibly 6-inch howitzers here. These pack a real punch, cover something like 8 to 10 miles at an absolute push, so very long range. See some artillery, or possibly a gun team galloping across the distance there. And you can see shells coming in. Actually, there's something strange about the shells. Generally speaking, German shells explode with a grey or blackish kind of smoke due to the type of explosive charge that they use, whereas British shells tend to explode with more of a white smoke. So you can usually tell which side's been doing the firing based on that. We see artillery piece in the foreground here as well, and some makeshift trenches kind of dug in to protect the crews. So 18-pounders firing. Fairly flat trajectory if you look at the direction of the barrel there, suggesting the range isn't particularly long, so it may well be that they're not that far back from the front lines. Plenty of bombardment going on in that village in the distance there. I do like that. Just to head back to that for a second, we've got an officer. Let's just pause on him. It's got a little bit of charm to it for me, these kind of moments. You see an officer here who's clearly got himself in the way of the camera. He's actually got some kind of, given this is 1917, he must be the recipient of a gallantry award. You can just about make out the ribbon up here. And there were no, unless it's a pre-war, unless he's a Boer War veteran or something along those lines. But some kind of gallantry award, you can just about make out his rank on the sleeve here as well. So, and some kind of marking on the helmet, which isn't that usual. It tends to be done by battalion, so it may well be his battalion cap badge up there. But he gets in the way and thinks, oops, better get out of the way. We see that 100 odd years later, that still happens plenty. Return artillery fire, possibly counter battery fire. And again, heavier guns here. The interesting thing about these weapons, in particular these heavier howitzers, is that barrels tend to need to be depressed in order to fire, in order to reload them. And that slows the rate of fire down, whereas an 18-pounder can be loaded without the barrel being depressed. So we can see rounds being winched in, we can see swabbing going on. And individual charges, we can just pause on that for a second as well. These heavier guns, we see this, and you see this a lot with naval stuff. You can see the individual shells stacked up here, ready to be fired, with a flat tip to them, suggesting they don't have their fuses on. But you also see the surge bags, the individual charge that's added afterwards, and that really regulates the distance that they're fired over. Sizable gun crew as well, maybe 15 guys there. Fired by a lanyard, you can see this is probably bombardier pulling a lanyard there to fire the piece. These would be used typically in a kind of pre-battle destructive fire, so smashing up enemy trenches. They would occasionally be used in a rolling or creeping barrage fire as well, but the rate of fire makes that a little more difficult to achieve. Clearly, the weather's still okay, which is interesting. You know, there's obviously some sun beating down there, and it's difficult to see on this kind of thing. But you saw somebody with a sun cape draped over the back of his neck there. So again, dug in howitzers. They suggest they've been there a little while. Takes quite a lot of effort to sandbag and dig these in. So chances are these have been static for some time. Again, huge ammunition dump here. West African troops probably relaying rounds up towards the support positions or up towards the gun batteries. We've got a whole mixture of troops here, actually. Maybe South African brigade, something along those lines. You can see the shells. If we just pause on here, you can see various different calibers of shell. It's probably 60-pounders in this, or 4.5-inch howitzers in this kind of foreground area, with kind of protective wooden slats on them. And then you've got much heavier, maybe 6-inch shells behind that. Looks like they haven't been fitted with their fuses, which typically sit on top there. So they've got kind of the carrying cover for the shell. But you can imagine the damage that might be done if an enemy artillery round dropped into something like that would be absolutely astronomical. Yep, so South African gunners firing. Again, 18-pounders, very quick. I mean, these things can fire 8-10 rounds a minute for a short period of time. Just feed them into the guns. There's next to no recoil, which means that they can fire super fast. And again, heavy stuff. This is a kind of classic trench shot. Let's just pause on that for a moment. So big shell going off in the background here. This kind of chalky outline, this suggests Battle of Arras, the Somme area and Arras. Once you dig down really a meter or two, you tend to hit chalk. So it's clay soil on top and then chalk pretty quickly underneath. So what you tend to see is where trench lines exist with a kind of low down shot like this, is you don't see the trenches themselves, but you see the spoil, the chalky spoil from where they've been digging down and then building up a parapet or a parados either side of it. So these kind of lines of chalk you see, that typically indicates trenches. Camouflage net, I'm not sure how much camouflage that's particularly offering. South African, possibly even Australian troops firing here. Infantry reserves moving up. So leaving a fairly makeshift trench. Their method of advance suggests their reserve or support line at this point, and then moving forward towards the front lines. They're all carrying the small packs on their backs. A lot of spades and shovels, and even corkscrew pickets and pickaxes. Just pause on this for a second. So this clearly suggests consolidation. One of the problems that you get in the First World War when you're involved in fighting of this kind is reversing trenches. So for example, if you capture a German trench, the fire step, i.e. the bit that you would fire out of, is facing the wrong way. It's facing towards your own troops. What you need to do is reverse that, and that means resetting the barbed wire on the other side of the trench. It means digging a new fire step. It means consolidating the position, and so on and so forth. And that's when German counterattacks tend to come in. So reserve and support troops are often brought up with equipment to help consolidate afterwards. These corkscrew pickets are a great example. In fact, they're a real lifesaver. If we bring one up on screen here for a second. Early in the war, the way of laying out barbed wire was to get wooden stakes, go out in no man's land, wooden stake and hammer that into the ground, and then string barbed wire between a couple of points. As you can imagine, having a hammer in no man's land, making a lot of noise, is a pretty life-limiting moment. So these things were invented. In fact, I think they're a Swedish invention. And they're called the corkscrew picket, sometimes the cul de cochon in French, the pig's tail. And the general idea is they work a little bit like a corkscrew in a wine bottle. So you can put an entrenching tool handle directly through one of the loops that are shown up here, either at the top or partway down. And you can literally corkscrew it into the ground. Also sometimes known as silent pickets. It means you don't have to be out there whacking a hammer around in no man's land. So clever, very well designed thing. Created, I think, by neutral Sweden and sold to the Germans and the Brits and the French and the Russians and whoever else wants to buy them. And everybody did. Again, very big, heavy guns. Again, you see the breach being opened here. Bedfordshire Regiment on the way up to the lines. This is likely one of the service battalions, the 6th or the 7th, so guys that are raised specifically for war service, preparing to go over the top. Got canvas covers on their helmets there, which some battalions will include. It's also, just pause on there for a second, a couple of nice little features. You can see troops starting to go over. Again, possibly a kind of consolidation shot. Down in the front here, though, you've got one of these things. This is a rum jar. So very likely the rum ration has just been handed out. It came in the same kind of stone flagon bottle all the time. And it was marked on the front SRD, which there's a little bit of dispute about what it is. It could be supply reserve depot, various other variations along those lines. But inevitably, troops in the front line, SRD, called it seldom reaches destination. A kind of tongue-in-cheek thing about the fact that they didn't get to see their rum very often. Troops advancing in the distance there. Fairly broken ground that we're looking at. German shells coming in. Again, you see that kind of dirtier smoke from the German explosive. It gives you that little hint as to which side's doing the firing. This is likely around the Arras area, so directly outside the city of Arras, with Vimy Ridge attack going on at the same time to its north, and then the French attack a week later on the Chemin des Dames going in to the south, quite a distance off. But tragically, that was an absolute failure, which means that this diversionary attack and the diversion of the diversion, i.e. Vimy Ridge, kind of pointless, sadly. Troops and supplies coming up. Got a medical detachment here carrying a stretcher. You can see from their armbands, they're very likely medics of the Royal Army Medical Corps, the RAMC, who are rather unkindly called in the front line sometimes RAMC. Rob all my comrades due to the suggestion and the real truth behind it that if you were wounded, your pockets would be gone through by the stretcher bearers or runaway mothers coming because they were an unarmed branch. But that's kind of British Army banter for you. In fact, the highest proportion of Victoria Crosses for bravery in the First World War are awarded to the Royal Army Medical Corps. And this is a good example of why, because these guys go out into no man's land on a regular basis, work extremely hard, bringing in wounded men, often under really heavy fire. This is a kind of classic trench scene, possibly a captured German trench by the looks of the destruction around as well. You see one guy trying to get some rest in the foreground, and then a stretcher with 4 men being taken through the line. This is a great shot as well. So much to pick out on this here. We got a German heavy machine gun being brought back probably as a souvenir. A lot of battalions like to do that. Being carried by German prisoners. See the 2 guys with the style helms on here, 3 of them in fact, and a guy wearing a pork pie hat, kind of German cap of the time. Interestingly, they're smiling as well. They're seeing the kind of fun side of being on film because it really was a novelty at this time by 1917. The guy at the back's not too happy though. More German prisoners coming through here. And again, more German prisoners, this time bringing back wounded soldiers. So we've got a British guard here for the POWs. Certainly 2 Germans on either end of both of these stretchers. And it looks like, at least based on the helmets, that the 2 men on the stretchers are wounded British or maybe Canadian troops. Yeah, certainly at the back, this guy's a wounded Allied troop, and 2 Germans carrying them away. More German prisoners here. We've got this guy on the right, sanitator, medic, and the 3 guys in the center wearing the Stahlhelms. Look, certainly one of them from his armband here is also a medic. So those little kind of sad moments that you see actually in here, and particularly true when you watch First World War video. If you just keep an eye on this guy down in the bottom left, he's talking but seemingly not to anyone, perhaps praying or something along those lines. Powerful stuff. See how the weather's changed as well. Very muddy now, churned up ground, everybody caked in mud. Not so many smiles on faces, but a couple of interesting bits on uniform. This guy just here, if we pause on that, he's a recipient of the Iron Cross Second Class. This little ribbon that you see in the buttonhole here, just up towards the top of the greatcoat, says that he's been awarded a medal for bravery in action. Also, we see this quite a lot. You can see the leading guy here is a medic, possibly the reserve, but he's using specific carrying straps. Extremely tiring as a stretcher bearer. So having a carrying strap like this, which takes a lot of the load off the arms, it makes it much more likely that you can continue doing that job for longer. More German prisoners. These would all have been feeding their way back from the advance, being searched for any kit and equipment they might have, any identifying material. That's an interesting shot as well. Let's just pause on this officer here. This is a major, so fairly senior battalion second in command, or a senior company commander in a battalion. He has certainly a number of medals. It looks like the ribbon here, white and blue on the far left side, is that of the Military Cross. So seen some bravery in action. And you can see from his Sam Brown belt and various other bits, he's an experienced soldier and clearly an officer. The ranks here are actually a little bit odd. There's something a bit strange here. I mean, amongst other things, it looks like we've got German officers being interrogated. This guy with the Stahlhelm on, with a cane, looks like an officer. Hard to tell, but he's certainly got some kind of decoration on his tunic, or the ribbon for it. And it looks like he's got officers' rank slides there. Yeah, in fact, he may well be quite senior, possibly a colonel, looking at that. This is an officer as well. So is this wounded man. You can just see wounded right arm or shoulder. You can definitely see the rank on his uniform there. The whole rank thing is a little bit odd, actually. There was one other rank. I'll just have a quick look at that there. If we look at the British guys next to it, there's an unusual rank on display just here at this point. This is 2 stripes, 2 chevrons with a crown above it. That doesn't really make sense, actually. It's normally you'd get 3 in a crown, that would be a quartermaster, 2 would be a corporal, but the combination of those 2 things are not likely to occur at the same time. So possibly this is a quartermaster in an acting appointment as a quartermaster. So a corporal serving as a company quartermaster sergeant has got the crown, but has not added the third chevron. So an unusual little situation. And there we are. It's the end of a reel looking at part of the Battle of Arras. Fascinating stuff. I always like drawing out those little bits like that. So there we go. I hope you found that interesting. Don't forget to check out Not So Quiet on the Western Front for more free World War I content. Your support is hugely appreciated. That's all this time. See you again soon.